Well, welcome to this biblical site of the Oaks of Mamre. This place here is absolutely loaded with history because when God begins to speak to the nations, He's going to use Abraham as the father of faith. He's our father of faith. Right here is where the Abrahamic Covenant will be made. And right here is where we're going to learn about Abraham as our father of faith. Now, right here at this site, it's very little visited because it's off the beaten path. Some people feel unsafe, but we have been treated like kings and queens, right? They love us to come here. So if you're watching this video, it's a safe place to come to. We had no problems whatsoever. The people here, they just love you and they will welcome you. So come to Hebron. So what we have here, my dear friends, is 5 layers going back in time that show us this is the authentic place where Abraham resided. He resided here. He was also in Beersheba. So he was in the Negev quite a bit, but he was here a lot, and then he was in Beersheba some as well. We're going to be looking at him, so we're going to see Abraham's altar is here. It's been preserved, Abraham's altar. Then we have from the time of King David, we have ruins from the time of King David. And then Herod the Great, the walls going around here, they're what King Herod built to preserve this site as well. And then after that, we have some Byzantine churches. And then after that, we have the Muslims, when they come in, they do stuff. We have 5 layers of archaeology here that tell us this is the spot. So this is going to be absolutely amazing as we explore this. We have our Bible time and our faith lesson. So are you ready to see this? Now, the Oaks of Mamre is located in Hebron, just about a mile north of the caves of Machpelah, where the patriarchs were buried. It's located in the Judean Mountains, about 20 miles or 32 kilometers south of Jerusalem. It stands at 3,000 feet or 914 meters above sea level, making it the highest city in Israel. It is located on a well-traveled route that runs north and south through the mountainous part of Israel. Well-known towns like Beersheba, Hebron, Bethlehem, Jerusalem, Bethel, Shiloh, and Shechem are located on this well-traveled route. Abraham and the other patriarchs traveled this route repeatedly. So let's walk over here and see the first thing of importance, and this is in a corner over here. This is the well. We know that there was a well here in the Oaks of Mamre because that's why Abraham would come here. There's water. What kind of trees were here? They were big oak trees, okay? We're going to look around and they're not huge, but we can see oak trees. So these are big trees. We saw some at Bethel, right? We saw that ancient 1,000-year-old oak tree. So these oak trees live a long time. We're going to see where they came up into the ground. We'll discover those. But anyway, there was a lot of water here. So therefore, these trees could be huge. So the great Oaks of Mamre, these huge trees. And then Abraham would have shade. He was a nomadic person. He had tents and things like that. And we have this well right here. So this is really the beginning of it all. We don't have water, then we're going to go somewhere else where there is water. This well has water in it to this day. And what was the time of Abraham roughly? Abraham comes into the promised land roughly in 2100 BC. So what we're looking at is you can come up here, we're looking at over 4,000 years right here. This water, same exact situation. It has some trash in there, but nonetheless, the well was here. What you're going to find in some of these sites here in these areas, sometimes are not kept up real well. but still they're easy to get to and access. So you want to take some pictures down here. Now some of these stones are from a later period. They've been redone, but that's the same well that was here that Abraham would have drank out of over 4,000 years ago. Unbelievable. Absolutely incredible. And I'm going to give you guys a little bit of homework when we're here. We're all going to be kind of amateur archaeologists, all right? The homework I have for you is I want you to find the holes in the ground up here where these huge oak trees grew out of. Okay, that's your homework. Okay, so you'll be looking for some big round holes that tell us where the oaks were. Okay, you're welcome to come on up here and take your photos. We're not in a hurry. The Minister of Tourism says you stay as long as you want. I don't even think they're going to charge us. You stay as long as you want, take all the photos, all the videos you want, and then he says, come to my office. We want to meet you and get to know you. And so this is the Ministry of Tourism for Hebron. And he calls us, gives us a personal phone call. And then we have right next door to the site here, what do we have? We have a school, Arabic school. And the kids just love Americans. They want to say hi and everything. I've seen other videos of groups that have visited here, and recently they have put up the fence really well so you can't get in here and over there. But in past times, the children, when Americans would come, tourists would come, then they would come in here and just hang out with you. Okay, so we have the well right here. Now let's step on over here and let's see if we can find this altar, Abraham's altar. It's in the center here. Once again, we have, it's overgrown with weeds here, but it's still here. Okay, so what we have here, this is Abraham's altar. Right here is Abraham's altar. It's in the center of the park here that's been preserved. You are standing, you are seeing things that are 4,000 years old right here. Roughly here is where the altar is. It's, once again, as you look at the facilities, it is pretty well in the center. Okay, now there's something else I want you to see. Do you guys see a channel that's running? Okay, now what would that be for? Water. Okay, a couple options. Could be water, could be maybe from sacrifices, things of that nature. It's a pagan blood channel drain from about 130 to 324 AD. This was used during the early Roman period to drain blood from the pagan sacrifices made on the original altar Abraham had constructed. This altar, this holy altar, was used and corrupted by the pagans to offer these sacrifices on. So this channel here is where the blood would drain from the sacrifices out. Really quite sad. Okay, so we have the well, we have the altar. These are 4,000 years old. Now we're going to go ahead in time 1,000 years, and then where does David, King David, reign for 7.5 years? So King David is going to reign about a mile or 2 miles or about 3 kilometers, roughly 2 to 3 kilometers to the south. He reigned just a short distance away. And so he knew this was Abraham's altar. He built walls and protection around this as well to venerate it. And we're going to see those in just a minute. Those are 3,000 years old. So we're going to go from 4,000 years old roughly now to 3,000 years old. Then we're going to just go through it in chronological order. Now, let's just talk for a moment about Abraham. Did Abraham live in one spot all the time? What do we call him? A nomad. Abraham was a nomad. Now, some of the critics will say, we don't have any archaeological evidence of Abraham, so therefore maybe he didn't exist. Well, nomads, when they move around, you don't even know where they've been a week or two later. They'll move their camp and then they'll go. Although Abraham did reside here for quite some time, he did reside in Beersheba for quite some time. He was in this area. These were the two main places that he would stay at. So then once again, when he's here, he likes this area because there's trees and the well here, but then he will go down to Beersheba and he will reside there as well. Once again, he's a nomad, and he's extremely wealthy, right? So you will move around so that your animals have grass. They'll be in an area, they'll eat that up, so then you move on. What we're going to do is we're going to look on the other side of that wall is King David's ruins. It's on the other side of the wall. We'll talk about it more in a moment, but the main wall we see around here is from Herod the Great. Herod the Great preserved 3 religious sites. This is one of them. What we have out in here then, over the wall, is then evidence of King David's period, honoring and venerating this site. When King Herod would come on the scene, then he's going to dismantle much of what King David did, because he wants to do something very, very big and monumental, because that's King Herod's style. And so he's going to dismantle what King David built to build something better in his mind. So if you see right over here, there's not a lot left of it, but you can see ruins over here. These are King David's ruins down here. This is the evidence from King David in this area right in here. Now Herod the Great, he left some of King David's outside the wall here, but King David's ruins would have come inside as well. Once again, they're going to preserve the altar, which is in the center of this site. That's what we're preserving here. This place is here because the altar of Abraham is here. That's why this is here. And Abraham is not just any kind of a person. He is the beginning. God calls him out of the Middle East, Haran, and then he brings him to the promised land. Says, I'm going to give you a land and a people. And God, we'll talk about it in a moment, but right here is where God's going to make this amazing covenant with Abraham and have the animals split apart, and God's going to walk through them. We're going to talk about that in a moment. Okay, so we have the well, 4,000 years old. We have the altar, 4,000 years old. Then we have the ruins of King David, 3,000 years old. Okay, now let's make our way back down. We're going to go over towards the flat area over there. As we're going, the big walls here are from Herod the Great. How do we know that? Well, we have historical sources, but we also can see by the style of stone that these are Herodian stones. Now these ruins that are inside the walls, they're going to be from various time periods, kind of all mixed together. You can see right over here on my right, you can see a stone that was like what they call a frieze, a decorated column. You can see that, that's just set right in here. Okay, this is from a later time period, just kind of built in. We've talked about how when these sites are renovated, rather than go cut new stones, we just use what's already here and put them in here. And you can see evidence of that right here. Okay, so let's make our way up this way. Okay, I'm going to get right over here, and we'll let the camera get over here too. We're going to now talk about the walls of Herod, but then we're also going to be talking about a Byzantine church that was here. And we can see the apse of the Byzantine church. Remember what an apse is? An apse is the front rounded face of a church. It's the rounded center part of a church. And so it's quite large, this Byzantine church. And so it's going to once again be preserving the altar. But guess what it's not going to do? Unlike most churches, this Byzantine church isn't going to cover the altar. It's going to leave the altar outside. So it's going to be more of a wider, shorter church. So again, right here is the ruins, and the church would go out over here, and then at the back of the church would be the altar. Let's just cast our eyes on the big solid walls. Okay, those are from the time of Herod the Great. So we have the well 4,000 years, Abraham's altar 4,000 years, King David's ruins 3,000 years, and then the big walls that Herod built, those are 2,000-year-old walls. And then this church is going to come into existence around the 4th, 5th century, and so it's going to be 1,500 years old roughly. And then in this area, beside the Byzantine church, are the ruins and remains from the Muslim period from around 638 AD. So those are your 5 layers of evidence here. Now let's talk about the Byzantine church here for a moment, okay? So, as we've talked in our travels around the Holy Land, that in 324 approximately, then Constantine was the emperor of Rome, then Christianity is going to be legalized, and now churches are going to spring up everywhere. Helena, Constantine's mother, would come to the Holy Land, build the Church of the Nativity, Church of the Holy Sepulchre, etc. And so now you're going to have these churches also now being built on or by these holy sites to affirm. And then, of course, later on, we're going to have a Muslim presence here in this area as well. We see Muslim evidence. So again, we have these 5 layers: Abraham, King David, Herod the Great, Byzantine church, Muslims. 5 layers. It says X marks the spot. This is it right here. So once again, we have this Byzantine church that is wide and short because it's going to leave the altar outside the church. While we're up here, let's kind of sweep and let's see if we can find these holes. Let's find these holes where these trees grew out of. Okay. How about right here? Do you think that might be one? That's one right there. That's one right there. And of course, there was a spring. You can see where water would come up in the winter. You can actually see water laying out in here. So there would kind of be a spring here as well. And that's why the well would be there. So where do you think that Abraham might have his tents set up? If you were here and you were Abraham, where would you have your tent set up? Yeah, so you're going to have it right in here, right? You got this big oak. Then you've got all this bedrock here where you can pitch your tent at. Isn't that amazing? Well, now we're going to come to our Bible time here and just look at some of the major events that happened from the Bible right where you're sitting. We have established that one of the oak trees was right here, and then it would be very probable then that Abraham would be camped out around here under the tree, the great Oaks of Mamre. And so you are actually in the very footsteps of Abraham, then the patriarchs. And of course, David would be here to build and preserve this site as well. So you really are on holy ground. And right here is where God will make the Abrahamic Covenant with Abraham, that through Abraham, all of the nations of the earth will be blessed. Abraham is called our father of faith. Father of faith. How is salvation obtained? Through faith. Through faith. It has always been through faith. It has never been by works. So Abraham, it says, believed God, and it was accredited or accounted to him as righteousness. And then later on, when the law would be given at Mount Sinai through Moses, God initiating it, then salvation was by faith in doing and obeying that, faith in that. And then Christ would come and be our salvation, our sacrifice, and so now salvation is going to be through faith in Him. It's always been by faith in God. Faith in God, Abraham's time, faith in God during the Old Testament, the law, faith in God when Christ was here because Christ was God in the flesh. So God would make the covenant with Abraham right here, but interestingly, in this covenant that God makes with Abraham, in that time when you made a covenant, you would take an animal, you would literally cut it in half, you would split it open, and then both parties would walk through with the statement that if anyone breaks the covenant, breaks the agreement, they're going to be like these animals. All right? We have this animal split open, but guess who doesn't walk through the animals? Abraham does not walk through. Why? Because the covenant God walks through, but Abraham is not, because this covenant is not going to be based upon Abraham and him fulfilling it. This is such a monumental covenant that it's going to be God who is going to keep His word. That if you believe in Him with the light that you have, whatever period, and you believe that and you have faith in God, not faith in just anybody, but faith in God and the Abrahamic Covenant, then that begins with Abraham, then we have the law, then we have Christ. If you believe in God through those systems, then you will be saved. And for those who don't have the law, as it says in Romans 2, you will be judged by the light that you have been given. Creation, you're without excuse. God writes His laws in our hearts. He gives us a conscience. His Spirit convicts us. So no one is without excuse. So right here is this monumental covenant that is made. Then right here, God will give the covenant or give the promise that Sarah is going to have a son. Right here. This is going to happen right here. And so what happens? It takes 25 years, but God fulfills His word. Once again, when God gives us promises, we don't always know when they're going to be fulfilled, but they will be fulfilled. So Abraham waited 25 years. And then who was born? Isaac. And then Jacob. Then Joseph. And from Jacob, he is now called Israel because he has 12 sons. And then you have the nation of Israel that comes into its fruition, so to speak. From here at Mamre, God will appear to Abraham through angels, and then God Himself through these angels, and talk about the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. So we were there, what we believe is ancient Gomorrah at the base of Masada, and it was from here then that God would give this revelation to Abraham. Then the two angels would go down to Sodom and Gomorrah, witness all the evil that was there. Then from here, Abraham would go to the kind of the cliffs overlooking the Dead Sea Basin and see the whole valley in smoke and ashes with fireballs of brimstone being rained down upon these cities. Then from here later on, because Abraham was a nomad, then he would go down to Beersheba and he would reside down there. And there's another well down there. So from Beersheba, then Abraham would take his son Isaac on a 3-day journey to Mount Moriah, which is where the Temple Mount is today. And he would go down there with the intent of sacrificing his son Isaac. But there's a substitute sacrifice a ram in a bush. So for us, who's the substitute sacrifice? Jesus Christ, okay? We're not going to pay for our own sins. We need a sacrifice. So once again, we're on holy ground where these major monumental covenants were made. This is our roots. Right here is your roots. What you believe, it didn't totally begin here because we have Noah and we have time before that, but after the flood, these are the roots right here. You are at the very beginning place of that. So just soak it in and just think about it. So now what are some faith lessons that we can take away from this place right here? Well, Abraham was a person of faith. God called him in Haran. He came from there. He left everything. He left his culture. He brought some of his family, and he would come to the promised land. He was obedient. And so in some regards, we see later on when Christ will say, unless you leave father, mother, brother, and sister, you can't be my disciple. Basically, he said the same thing to Abraham. Abraham comes believing in God. Not just believing, but obeying. It's one thing to know, it's another thing to do. So he comes here. And then here, the covenants would be given to him. Circumcision would begin with Abraham. And so he is our father of faith. What about us? What would we be willing to leave for God? We know from Beersheba, he's going to go on a 3-day journey. Isaac is now a young man, probably 12, 13. He's going to take his son, whom he had waited 25 years for, who is everything, and he's going to be willing to offer his son to God. So he's willing to go wherever, and he's willing to give up whatever God asked him for. That's why he's our father of faith. He's our father of faith. And when the knife was coming down that Abraham had to kill his son, God says to an angel, stop. And then he says, now I know that you fear me. Now I know that you love me. And he will then reaffirm the Abrahamic Covenant with Abraham. Because you love me. So what about us? Are we like Abraham? Are we willing to go anywhere? And are we willing to give up anything? And in Genesis, when Abraham's going to go from Beersheba to Mount Moriah in Jerusalem, it begins by God tested Abraham. It was a test. So in some regards, God is always testing us to find out who is our Isaac. Who do you love more than me? Because God is a jealous God. And God's going to test you to see who your Isaac is. Who do you love more than me? Who do you love more than me? So he's going to allow us to go through these tests, and they're real tests. They're just not fake. They're real tests. So we should be willing to be like Abraham, go wherever and give up whatever that God would ask us. To be like Abraham, our father of faith. How special to be here, right? What a blessing to be here. Very few people come to their roots right here and to just ponder what Abraham did, who he was. There's a reason why he's our father of faith. There's a reason, because he would go anywhere and give up anything. He believed, and it says in Hebrews that he even thought that even though he killed his son, that God would raise him from the dead. Incredible faith. He believed. For him, everything was possible. Well, thank you so much. Great privilege to be here. And may we be like Abraham. And may God richly bless you in that effort.